When you're spinning up Docker containers and other services on your Homelab, it can be really annoying to have to always type in the IP address and the port of that service to access it. And aside from it being annoying, you can't even access these services from off of your network with that IP and that port. Even if you have something like Tailscale set up for remote access, which I did a video on, by the way, it still doesn't overcome the annoying part of remembering IP addresses and remembering ports. Wouldn't it just be a lot easier to type in something like photos.mydomain.net instead of something like 192.168.0.183:8491? Yeah, it would be. And enter the topic of today's video, Cloudflare tunnels. For those who don't know, Cloudflare is a massive tech company that provides all kinds of internet-based services. A very significant portion of the internet runs off of one of Cloudflare's services or a combination of them. And one of those services, and the topic of today's video, is the Cloudflare tunnel. A Cloudflare tunnel is basically a secure connection between your server and Cloudflare's infrastructure. What's special about this tunnel is that it doesn't require any IP address sharing, port forwarding, or anything like that. Instead, you use a tool called Cloudflare to create that connection, which basically allows Cloudflare to handle things like CDN caching, DNS, bot management, and DDoS protection, among other things. Once the tunnel is set up, the important part is that you can map public host names like myjellyfinserver.net to the internal IP address and port on your server so that you can access that service from off of your network with a host name instead of an IP address and port. It's a pretty safe, effective, and simple way to expose services on your network to the internet at large for use by you remotely or by other users also. Now, a bit of a disclaimer here, I'm not an expert on the IT infrastructure that goes into a Cloudflare tunnel. That being said, I am going to do my best to explain the relevant parts of this Cloudflare tunnel so that you have an understanding-ish of how this technology works. I would also strongly recommend you to read through some of Cloudflare's own documentation on what a tunnel is and how it works so that you're informed. I'll have a link to that down in the description. Before getting into the actual setup of Cloudflare though, I think it's important to talk about a few pros and cons of why you should or maybe shouldn't use a Cloudflare tunnel. We're gonna kick things off here with the pros. First off, it's pretty simple to set up. It might seem daunting at first, but when you kind of get used to the process, it's pretty easy and pretty scalable. Number two, Cloudflare handles a lot of the security for you. The tunnel is post-quantum encrypted and uses a lot of Cloudflare security protocols to protect you from web scraping, bots, and other types of internet attacks. Number three, it automatically handles SSL/TLS certificates. That means that you don't have to worry about signing all of these certificates yourself because it's automatically handled by the tunnel. Number four, it doesn't require IP sharing or port forwarding. This reduces the attack surface for bad actors so that you're more secure in exposing these services to the internet. Number five, it is very scalable. You aren't meaningfully limited to a certain number of services or have to stay under a very limited usage band. That brings us to our next point, number six. It can be used entirely for free. That is, at least until you scale out of something like a Homelab and more into something like a medium to large business. Notably, the free version of Cloudflare tunnels also does not allow high bitrate video streaming, so something like streaming your 4K Blu-ray collection from Jellyfin through a Cloudflare tunnel is unfortunately off the table. And while the tunnel itself is free, there is one little caveat. You will need to purchase a domain. But if you do just a tiny bit of searching, you can get a year's worth of a domain for about $10, which in my opinion is pretty negligible for the benefit that you get. Now let's move on to some of these cons. And depending on who you are, this first one might not be a con at all, but in my book, it can be. Number one, it runs on hardware that isn't yours. That means that your insight into exactly what is happening on the Cloudflare side is limited, which again, to some people is a pro because you're not responsible for uptime. Which brings us to the second con, is that you are dependent on Cloudflare's infrastructure. That means if they go down, you go down. And finally, the third one I touched on a little bit at the end of the pros list, and that is that they don't allow high bitrate video streaming through their free tier. With a better understanding of the pros and cons of a Cloudflare tunnel, let's get into actually setting this up on your Unraid server. The very first step is to create a Cloudflare account and find a domain. Go ahead and head over to cloudflare.com, hit login, and then create an account. Note that you will need to verify your email address before you can purchase a domain, so go ahead and do that before moving forward. Now, once you've logged in and verified your email, let's go get a domain. Luckily, Cloudflare has a domain registry that you can use to purchase a domain. On the navigation bar on the left, go to Domains and Registrations. this is where you're gonna find your domain name. Just start searching for whatever you would like. If you're exposing services just for you, something with your name in it is probably more than fine. After you enter whatever your search is, you'll be met with a bunch of different options. This part is basically just picking out whatever option you like the most. As far as choosing a .com, .net, or some other dot ending, the choice is mostly up to you. I would steer away from orgs or from obscure ones, so if you can get a .com or a .net, that's preferred just because it's a little bit easier and more intuitive to use, but there's really no reason that you couldn't go with other endings. Once you've picked one out, go ahead and confirm and you'll be asked to fill out your contact information. This just makes sure that they can update their domain registry with the new owner and that they can contact you about important information like renewing your access to it. After you fill out that info, go ahead and choose your registration period. I recommend with going for just a year and turning off auto renewals because you can turn those on in the future if you would like, and it's very rare that the price of domains increases year over year. Then just continue on to payment and purchase your domain. I'm not going to be showing that part for obvious reasons. Now you are a proud owner of your very own domain. Congratulations. This now allows us to move on to creating the actual tunnel, which we'll get into right now. There are several parts to this, but the main steps are going to be to create the tunnel on the Cloudflare side of things and then go into Unraid and connect securely to that tunnel. We're going to start off with the Cloudflare side of things. So go back to your dashboard and then on the left, go to networking and tunnels. Click on that page and then go ahead and click on create tunnel when you get there and name this whatever you would like. I'm just going to go with the name of my Unraid server. Then you're going to be presented with installation instructions for a variety of operating systems. For us, go ahead and click on the Docker option and you will see an install script. If you're comfortable with terminal commands, you can just copy this script, go over to your Unraid terminal, paste it in there and run it, and you should get what you're looking for. But if you're like me and prefer going through a GUI, just keep watching and I'll show you how to do it. Go ahead and still copy this install script, but instead go ahead and paste it into some form of a text editor so that we can see all of the parts of what that script is. Specifically, we're going to need this long string called the token. Now keep that handy here because we're going to use it in just a moment or two. Now go to Unraid, specifically to the apps tab. Once there, search for Unraid Cloudflare tunnel and click the monthly spotlight one from Figros repository, then hit install. When the configuration window pops up, you're going to want to go to the top right and then select advanced view. This gives us a few more important configuration options. Scroll down and when you see extra parameters, you're going to want to enter -- restart space unless -- stopped. This will just make sure that if your container stops for some reason other than you manually stopping it, it's going to automatically try to restart itself. And this just helps with uptime, which is important when you're exposing services through this tunnel, because if that tunnel goes down, so does your access to those services. Now, if you continued scrolling down in this configs page, you're gonna see a few variables. In the spot for tunnel token, you're going to copy the token that you got from the install script and paste it in here. It's just that long string at the end of the install script. The next variable is no auto update, and I would just leave this as its default value. This means that this container will not automatically update. You likely don't want automatic updates because sometimes an update will break a tunnel in some unforeseen way, meaning that you can't access services in it. It's generally best practice with crucial things like this to regularly update them manually to ensure proper uptime. If you want to tinker around a little bit with other settings, you can hit this extra settings drop down and you'll be met with a bunch of other variables that you can tweak. I'm just going to leave these all as their default values because I don't need to change any of them and it's unlikely that you do either. When you have everything configured how you would like, go ahead and just scroll down to the config page and then hit apply. Now, just sit back and wait for the container to do its thing. Once everything is downloaded and installed, go ahead and hit done and go back to your Docker tab. And there you should see a container called Unraid-Cloudflare-tunnel. While you're here, make sure that you toggle on the auto start on the right so that when your server restarts, this container will automatically start running when you spin up the array. This just helps minimize downtime. If you have a successful connection, you should be able to go back to the Cloudflare tab where you created the tunnel and see that your tunnel has connected successfully. This means that you can start creating routes. A route will basically take a local address, like an IP address in a port, and map it to a public host name with your new domain. To show how this works and how to configure it, I spun up a quick instance of Homebox just for testing purposes. You can do this with whatever service you would like. What you want to do is copy the LAN IP port part in the Unraid Docker tab and keep that on your clipboard. Now go back to the Cloudflare tunnels page, and then in the top left of this page, click on routes and then add route in the top right. You're gonna want to choose published application, and here's where you're actually gonna set up the routing. I like to use the subdomain field instead of the path field. For instance, I'll put the name of my service in the subdomain, so homebox, so I get a full host name like homebox.mydomain.com. If you prefer to use the path field instead, your hostname will look like mydomain.com/homebox. The reason I prefer to use subdomains is because I like to have these paths open just in case a particular service needs specific paths on top of it. Either way, the functionality is mostly the same. Next, you're gonna wanna enter in the LAN IP and port that you just copied from Unraid, but with the prefix http://. So for my homebox instance, I'll put http://192.168.1.4:3100. When your configuration is done, go ahead and hit add route. Now you can type in the host name into a search bar in a browser and you'll go to that service's web GUI. If it doesn't work immediately, I would give it just a few seconds to make sure that the routing can actually configure on Cloudflare's side. And you can just repeat that process by adding routes for every service that you want to publish like that. It's pretty scalable and pretty easy to do. Now there's an important security caveat that I need to go over here. These are public routes, meaning that whoever has the host name for your service can access it. So if you happen to know what my domain is, you could type in homebox.whatever domain I used, .net, .com, .whatever it is, and see the same thing that I would see if I went there. That's why it's important to make sure that all of your services require some sort of login before they can be used so that other people can't intrude into those services without permission. I would also recommend turning off any automatic user registration so that new people can't just accidentally access your site and create their own account and then have access. To keep things a little simple, I would also recommend looking at something like Authentic, which is a self-hosted identity provider, so that you can basically have your own self-hosted SSO, meaning you have the same username and password for all of the services that you have Authentic set up with. If you would like a full-length video on how to set up Authentic so that it's easy for you and your users to access services, but that you're securing connection to them, please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful and were able to get everything up and ready. If you did find this video helpful, please consider giving it a like and subscribing for more content like this in the future. And if you're looking for something else to watch right now, maybe go check out all of the other services that I'm running on my main Homelab in this video I did here. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.